Welcome everyone to Little Mao's podcast. 欢迎光临你们的朋友，谢谢你们参加我的 podcast. Little Mao, 小毛啊。This podcast is dedicated to three principles. The first one, the core principle, is no speech, no life. 核心的原则就是没有言论，没有自由。So I'm going to be speaking some Chinese and I'm going to be speaking some English throughout the podcast to try to invite the largest audience. 我的意思就是我要跟你们说中文，因为我觉得中国的观众是非常重要，我要你们听我的话。So, like I said, the core principle of this podcast is no speech, no life. And so I'm going to be discussing a number of issues. I'll be discussing Marxism. I will be discussing the Little Red Book, 小红书, during the Cultural Revolution. 文化大革命的书非常重要。我要讲这个马克思主义的 idea. I want to talk about the ideas in this book. And I will speak Chinese when I talk about the quotations of Chairman Mao, the Cultural Revolution, and the Marxist ideas that he promoted. And I will say Chinese for the quotation, then I will speak English, I will translate the quotation, and then I'm going to make some comments about Marxism. The third thing that I'm going to be talking about is what I call crushing facts, or meta lies that exist in political and sociological dynamics. So I'm going to talk about things that I think you'll find very interesting. And each podcast I will give a number of facts that I think you will find interesting relating to political issues affecting the United States and also affecting Asia. So in Chinese you say 全中国是一人斗渐进事实 which is a crushing fact. 我要跟你们讲那个侯好色的说谎 which is what we call a meta lie. This is not something that translates easily into Chinese, but 后色就是以后的后加色的色. So from that, I think you'll find it very interesting. Now, it may be a little bit difficult for me in the beginning of my podcast to go back and forth between Chinese because I have to switch languages in my head, but I'm going to do my best, and I want to say sorry right now. Okay. So I'll start with the Little Red Book, and here is the Little Red Book. So this was a very important book during the Cultural Revolution. It's a core component of Chinese ideology, and there are echoes of it that probably still exist or do exist in China today, and there are American Marxists who think this book is just absolutely wonderful. So I'm going to talk about that. And I'll begin by saying, what does it say on the front cover here? It says 最高指示, which basically means the highest commands, the highest directives. And if we open up the Little Red Book, on the first page here, I open it for you so you guys can see it. On the very first page it says, this is very profound, prepare yourselves, 准备听我的话。我的评论，小猫的评论，你要听。Says, 全世界无产者联合起来, which means workers of the world unite. So it's this idea that if the proletariat rises to complete and total power, a minority group, everything's going to become a utopia and everything's going to be perfect and there's not going to be any corruption and everyone's going to be happy. That's a core tenet of Marxism, and it's stated here as a major slogan in the Little Red Book. And if I open it up to the first quotation, I think you'll find it interesting. I'm going to read two quotations to you today. Let's see. Let me get to it here. First quotation. The first quotation is the first chapters on the Communist Party. So I'm going to read that, and I think you guys will find it enjoyable. And I'll start off this way. As I stated at the start of the podcast, I'm going to be speaking Chinese and English. So I'll start off with Chinese for the first two quotations, and then I'm going to give you the English translation of it. Okay, so on 共产党 communism. 领导我们事业的核心力量是中国共产党，知道我们思想的理论基础是马克思列宁主义. Okay, so that's the first quotation for Chairman Mao. And the second quotation. 只要革命就要有一个革命党，没有一个革命党的党，没有一个按照马克思列宁主义的革命理论和革命风格建立起来的革命党，就不可能领导工人阶级和广大人民群众战胜帝国主义及其走狗. Okay, so those are the first two quotations of Chairman Mao of this beautiful little red book. And what does this all mean? What does it mean? Well, the first translation, the first quotation is, the force of the core leading our cause forward is the Chinese Communist Party. 领导我们 leading us. That's our core principle. 核心力量 means the core power is the Communist Party. The theoretical basis, 理论思想的理论, that's our theoretical basis guiding our thinking is Marxism and Leninism. That's the first one. And in the second quotation, the English is, if there is to be a revolution, there must be a revolutionary party. A revolutionary party is 革命的党. If you don't have this, without a party built on Marxist-Leninist revolutionary theory, and in the Marxist-Leninist revolutionary style, it is impossible to lead the working class and the broad masses of the people in defeating imperialism and its running dogs. That's right, I just said that, running dogs. So the quotation reads, defeating imperialism and its running dogs. The first comment I would say is, Marxism is a murderous ideology. It is absolute murder. Marxist himself, in his Communist Manifesto, all the axioms, all the theories that he stated in it, he believed to be self-evident. There's not one of them that is self-evident. So I want to say in Chinese, 马克思主义就是杀人的哲学，杀人的观念啊，就是推动腐败的方式，腐败的情况，推动腐败的情况，或遗传模式的情况，没有生产什么特别的，就是一个机会跟特别的人就会做腐败的事。So it's basically, if we look at the first and second quotation, it's a witch doctor with no cure. The whole Marxist ideology is built upon witch doctor medicine with absolutely zero cures, zero mechanisms to achieve everything that they want to achieve that he states. So in Chinese we say, 那个共产党的观念就是里里有北宫胡说八道，就是狗屎啊，就是这样子，就是一个非常暴力的观念，非常暴力，就是他们的核心的原则就是暴力，然后偷东西啊。So that is all I want to say about it. That is the Marxist ideology. I just read to you the first quotations. I think that 我就觉得那个毛主席有进水了，脑子进水了，我不知道他说什么。So this idea of here, the running dogs and defeating imperialism, the assumption is that the main idea is that if you have a working class and proletariat and equity, and you redistribute everything and steal everything to accomplish this utopia, the people that are going to be elevated in power are just going to be divine. They're going to do good. This is complete nonsense. It's 胡说八道。中文里面说有坏人有好人，没有关系情况，没有关系什么制度。什么政治的 制度没有关系啊。So the first flaw in this is that evil only resides with people that build up capital. And that once you remove these people, everyone is just going to be kind. And there's going to be no corruption. And if there is a case study to be studied, it is that China is probably one of the most corrupt countries in the world. And the reason is you have a small group of proletariat people that have power, they have direct investment, they're able to use that to leverage themselves to stay in power because it isn't competency and it doesn't breed good people. So those are the first comments I want to say about the Little Red Book. And then last thing I want to say is all those bow before Chairman Mao, but there is no more Mao. This is over. This has been over for a long time. So in Chinese we say 中人向毛主席磕头致敬. And I also want to say 中人向维尼兄磕头致敬 and 毛万岁. 毛主席万岁 and 总统拜登万岁 and 维尼兄万岁. So that's the Chinese fever from in Marxist ideology that existed back then, and some could argue that it still exists today because I've heard in recent circles in the U.S. political system people quoting Chairman Mao and quoting aspects of these quotations in public light. So I thought it would be interesting to share with you how this is complete nonsense. All right. So now going on to crushing facts, the third part of this podcast. As I said earlier, crushing facts 就是创中国使一人斗前进实时. I'm going to discuss a few crushing facts, things that I think you are going to find very interesting. And the first one is I'm going to talk about the November election. And I just wanted to state that according to Rand Paul interview, 86 challenges rejected for lack of standing, not because of evidence. So as you know, during that election, there were a lot of questions. I think it's important to note that, as Rand Paul said, there were 86 challenges in the court system. They were not rejected because of evidence. They were rejected because they had lack of standing. And there's a big difference. So I encourage all of you to look that up. I encourage you to look up what lack of standing means. This relates to procedural grounds. It remains to judicial territory and authority. It has nothing to do with evidence. So that's a crushing fact. If you're interested in learning more about this, I recommend that you watch NTD News on YouTube. This is a great place that reviewed this very closely. There's tons and tons and hours of testimony, direct evidence relating to the controversy surrounding that, and I encourage you guys to take a look at that. The next crushing fact I want to talk about, number 2, the Rittenhouse case, Kyle Rittenhouse and his acquittal. I'm just going to say one little thing about the Rittenhouse acquittal. Take a look at the people that were involved in this. Joseph Rosenbaum, Gage Grosskreutz, Maurice Freeland, Anthony Hubert. These were not nice people. Joseph Rosenbaum had just got released from a mental institution. He was threatening, according to testimony in the trial, to kill black people in Kenosha. He was a convicted child rapist. This was some really bad people. Make your own decisions, of course. Think what you want about this case, but at least take some time to look at the people involved and decide for yourself. So for me, this is a crushing fact. The third one, the one I'm really going to enjoy, this is a shout out to little man, Lebron James, Mr. Pro-China. 维尼兄的朋友, LeBron James. I just wanted to point out, Mr. James, is that your name in Chinese is Xiao Huangdi. I don't know if you're aware of this. Like I said, this is a shout out to you. Xiao Huangdi is not a flattering name. What it means is spoiled only child or spoiled child. This is not flattering, and that's your name in Chinese. I don't know if you know this, but I thought it would be interesting for you. The next thing I want to talk about is John Gallagher. who's a Republican House representative from Wisconsin. And in a recent interview, he stated that for the past 2 years, Nike, Disney, and Apple have lobbied against the Uyghur Labor Force Prevention Act in Congress in the United States. That's right. Nike, Disney, and Apple have lobbied against stopping genocide in Xinjiang province in mainland China. Now, globally, there's not much dispute on this controversy. Most countries of the world believe and know that there is genocide occurring in Xinjiang province. And as John Gallagher, and you should check his background. I encourage you guys to, anyone listening to this podcast, check John Gallagher. Gallagher. John Gallagher's background. He has a strong background in intelligence. Very knowledgeable man. Many years of professional experience in counterterrorism. Knows a lot about this topic. And as I said in a recent interview, he said Disney, Apple, and Nike had lobbied against it. Which leads me to Marxism and National Socialism. As many of you probably know, another crushing fact is that Germany in World War II was a National Socialist country. And where did it lead? It led to genocide. That's where it led. So Marxism and National Socialism seems to lead to one direction. Some type of identity politics where people are cornered, judged based on some type of group identity that's manufactured. And you're seeing this play out in China under Marxist doctrine, a genocide. So anyway, look that up. John Gallagher, his comments on in his recent interviews, and you'll discover if that's true or not. The next crushing fact I want to talk about is that according to The Economist, this article, and there are many articles like this, according to The Economist, which I encourage you to read, it's a good magazine, $3,000 of fentanyl in China has a street value of $1.5 million. So I'll say that again. $3,000 worth of fentanyl in China has a street value of $1.5 million. I would say that's a big problem. And given China's state capacity of surveillance and state control, it's a little shocking that the United States has a fentanyl problem. I'm not going to get into the details of the damage that fentanyl has caused to the United States. I'm sure many of you are well aware of it. And the last thing I want to say is the last crushing, or I have two more crushing facts. The last thing I want to say is state expansion, more money you invest in government services leads to less services in return. I'll say that again. The more money you give big government and government expansion, the less services you will get in return. It's a diminishing return in services. So anyone considering increasing spending and expanding government control and powers and programs, just remember, the more money you give, the less services you get in return. And I don't know if any of you are aware of this book. It's called Currency Wars by James Rickards. It's a great book. And in that, he talks a little bit about how as increased revenue goes into a government, the less services you get in return. It's a very fascinating book, and I encourage you guys to read it. And lastly, the last crushing fact. I had this discussion with somebody recently. What is the biggest export of mainland China? What is the biggest export between the United States and China, or the world? China and the world. The number one export for China right now today is mask-wearing culture. And that's true. Their largest export is mask-wearing culture. That's the number one export right now. And I say this, and I say it kind of satirically, and I say this in jest, but it's also true. And I had this conversation with somebody recently about trade flows. And they paused and they stopped me and they said to me, a friend of mine said to me, their largest export is mask-wearing culture. That's their biggest export now. So something to think about. And that's it. This is my podcast. This is the end of my podcast. I want to thank all of you for participating. 我要感谢你们参加我的 podcast. 谢谢你们. And I want to say, 没有言论没有自由. So I want to say to all of you, thank you for seeing my podcast. No speech, no life. Peace out.